Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Right Circle, an initiative of Prabha Khetan Foundation presented by Sri Cement Limited. Established in 1980s, Prabha Khetan Foundation is dedicated to promote Indian art, culture, literature, music through various initiatives and projects. Prabha Khetan Foundation, each endeavor reflects its keen interest to further humanitarian causes. The foundation anthem portrays the true spirit of Indian philosophy, unity in diversity. Here, the poetic genius of Rabindranath Tagore flows into the folk music of Rajasthan and Dadra fuses with Kajri. True to the spirit of the foundation, we promote local artisans when it's time to show appreciation to our patron and guests by endorsing their products. We try to create awareness in the community by focusing on one pressing social issue every month. This endeavor is appropriately named as Cause of the Month. In December, the foundation is upholding the very important social issue of human rights through the poignant artwork of Sudipta Kundu. Follow us on our social platform to know more on this. Today, we gathered on this online platform for a session of the Right Circle, which strives to bring together author and their readers in an informal and engaging setting. We have with us Mr. Sidhartha Mallya. Siddhartha is an actor and model. In 2016, he was awarded a diploma supplement for a Master of Arts degree in acting for screen from the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama from the University of London. He has also worked as director of IPL cricket team Royal Challengers Bangalore, which was owned by his father at the time. In conversation with Siddhartha is Miss Anchal Garcha, Aisas woman of Raipur. Without further ado, I request you all to sit back, relax, enjoy today's session. Thank you.
Hello, Siddhartha.
Hi, Anshul.
In the meanwhile, I we have everyone here with us, and we'd just like to start by asking you, Siddhartha, that what inspired you to write this book? It's this book
Yeah.
is making news, and it's everywhere on the social media. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, first of all, let me start by saying, big thank you to everyone who's joined in for this session. I know it's late in India for a lot of people on a Friday night, so thank you for taking the time to join. I appreciate it a lot. What inspired me was really, I did a series last year on Instagram where I spoke about mental health. And I saw the amazing response that series received from people, mainly in India, youngsters in India. And I thought that, well, I've got to continue doing whatever I can to keep shining a light on mental health and to keep kind of not changing, but at least shining a light on it, getting more people to talk about it. And that's, for me, where the book came from.
All right. Yeah. So, my next question to you is growing up, you have had a very privileged life from a materialistic point of view. But you always talk about, in your book, you talk about feeling emotionally deprived, right? So, you've had your share of struggles like anybody else. For instance, you've lived a great part of your life being scared that whatever you do, and I quote, would be put under a microscope and viewed as just someone's son who got lucky because of who his dad was.
Yeah.
How much of your life and your choices have been affected by this nagging fear?
Honestly, I'd say quite a lot until recently. It's something that, as you see, I talk about. There's an entire chapter kind of dedicated to this in the book where I speak about how a constant fear of being judged or ridiculed in some way or another because of the family I come from did have an effect on me and did have an effect on some of the decisions I made, and definitely drove me to want to kind of prove to people that I was more than just what they might have thought. So yeah, it did have a big impact on me.
One line that I love from one of the early chapters, I think Sid the Kid, it's, I think, very important line. Mental health does not discriminate. You
Yeah,
write, no one is immune from suffering mental health issues. Now,
yeah,
this, I believe, is a point that must be driven home because it's often not understood. And it's as ridiculous as saying, how can you have cancer? You know, you're so
yeah,
privileged, you're so rich.
yeah.
So yet, majority of people fail to grasp this. So would you please elaborate on this, what you've written in the
Yeah,
book?
and I'm glad that you brought this up because this is, for me, one of the big points that I wanted to get across in the book, is that mental health doesn't discriminate. Whether you are rich, poor, Asian, African, European, Muslim, Hindu, female, male, gender neutral, whatever it is, everyone is susceptible to suffering from issues of mental health. It doesn't discriminate. And to kind of have this, where there can sometimes be this belief, right, that it can either only affect certain people or only certain people can be helped from it. To have that kind of view is dangerous because it will make people feel, who are from privilege, who are suffering, guilty, and it will make people who perhaps aren't from such privilege, who might be suffering, feel like there's no hope for them. And both of those things are just simply untrue. There's tons of ways to help everyone. And no matter who you are, where you come from, you have a right to feel the way you do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a disease after all. It's a kind of a disease. It may be mental, it does not affect your body, it affects your mind, but it's still
Yeah,
a disease, right?
and
Something that you have to seek treatment for.
of course, and treatment
You
can come
also
in.
talk about, yeah,
I'm saying is that treatment can
yeah,
come in
and
a
you
number
you also
of
talk
forms.
about different ways. Yes, you've talked at length about that. In fact, I really like that you've brought up when you should seek professional help, because all of us go through something or the other in life, but when do we actually seek professional help? So you've talked about that, so I'm sure people who read will benefit. In the book, you described yourself as a playful, often naughty child.
Yeah,
Dennis the Menace is the comparison that you've drawn. That's the term, right? And
yeah,
you've described your dad as well as a playful adult. That was a beautiful part.
yeah,
So I know later on, as you grew older, it was a whole roller coaster of emotions, and between you and him. But I think that's pretty understandable for any father-son relationship. But I would love for you to share with us about some of that fun, dynamic father-son relationship of your childhood, that
yeah.
bonding that you
Well,
had with him.
I mean, he's also an only child, so he didn't grow up with any siblings either. So we're both, from that point of view, very similar. And obviously, he lost his father. So my grandfather at a very young age, I think he was 27 when he died. So he'd spent a lot of time on his own. But I just remember the fun we used to have when he obviously wasn't there all that often because he was working, and we were living in the UK, myself and my mum, and he was kind of working and commuting back and forward from India. So it was not like one of those relationships, families where the father and mother was always there. So kind of having him there was a novelty almost. And I used to remember when he was coming, I write this in the book, when he was coming into town, just how like the whole house used to light up, and how, this is before I went to boarding school, how I'd be very excited to, if I knew he was going to be there, or if he was in town, like I'd be very excited during that day at school, knowing that I'd go home and I'd get to see him there. And it was an exciting time. Are you there, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm there now. I can hear you.
You didn't lose me, did you? No.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that it's that he's a joker as well. But I remember back to, I think it would be in around the early 2000s. I don't know if you remember, but there was like this big thing people used to, this is before the days of WhatsApp and Instagram. You're on mute. Can you hear me?
Yeah. No, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So these are the days before like WhatsApp and Instagram and everything like that. But there was this whole period where people used to send SMS jokes to everyone. And somehow I ended up getting on the list with him and his friends. So I'd get all of these jokes, and I was kind of like the big joke teller as well. So it was always quite fun, just like being like that. And also the other thing with him is that, you know, even though he's going to be 66 next week, but all of his friends are kind of like my friends, even though they're his age, and even my friends are kind of like his friends, and that's kind of like the relationship we have, which is quite fun.
That's pretty beautiful, actually. Yeah, and that's rare in India, at least.
Yeah.
So you're lucky about it. All right. There was this incident where you locked somebody up, and he was very cool about that in the office.
Well, I think he encouraged me. He encouraged it.
Okay. So, yeah. All right. So you talk about how growing up, you always had this relentless urge to be your own person and shake off the baggage that came with your surname. In fact, I admired the bit where you talk about you were a celebrity even when there wasn't much to celebrate. Sidhartha, you embraced your truth wholly, what I could just gather from the book and whatever little I know about you. But what most people don't know is that you've paid your dues, never cut corners, never tried to take the easy way. Rather, you fought hard to create your own niche. And this I wanted to get out there today. And I'm sure this book is one such personal achievement for you. So tell us what it meant to you personally to get this book out there. On your personal journey, how important of a milestone was this?
So it's a couple of things. I think, all right, I'm going to answer this in a couple of ways. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but I'm going to tilt my camera down. Behind me on the shelf over there, there's a copy of the book you can see. And next to it is a GQ award that GQ gave me in 2011. So exactly 10 years ago. Now, I keep that award on the shelf and I keep the book next to it as a real reminder of like how far I've come in 10 years. Because, you know, if you told me 10 years ago that I was going to be writing books, I'd be like, you must be mad. But I think the funny thing is that back in 2011, when I was getting that GQ award, I would have thought that that was the real me. But today, releasing the book, I feel the most content I felt as myself as a person from releasing the book. And that's why I keep the two of them together, just as a reminder that you can change through life. The thing that's been the most gratifying about the book has been really just being able to help people, you know, people replying to me saying, you know, being able to do conversations like this with you today, being able to do chats like this, and knowing that we're able to talk about a subject that's really going to help people.
Yes.
You know, while going and shooting GQ magazine covers is fun, don't get me wrong, it doesn't really move the needle in changing the world and helping people. Whereas writing this book, I'd like to at least believe I've done my little part in somehow making society that little much better.
You definitely have, most definitely have. I read the book and the first thought that came to me was that your heart is in the right place with this book. There is no denying that. And I hope anybody who reads that will feel it. Okay. Yeah. So I love the fact that throughout the book, you know, you and your life too, of course, I'm sure, you've taken ownership of all your mistakes. And if I may say, all your irresponsible behavior as a young lad. You never tried to justify or hide behind the pain or blame any of these behaviors on the trauma that you experienced as a child that not many people know about, you know, all the abandonment issues that you talk about. So I think that's mighty brave of you, number one.
Thank you.
And you're actually very honest against popular belief, I think, because the public perception of you is full of a lot of misconceptions, right? So I want to ask you what, according to you, is the biggest myth that comes with being Sid Mallya?
I mean, I think the biggest myth is, well, I mean, it's hard to say that because I think that, you know, a lot of the time, well, I think the biggest myth comes from something that you hit upon right at the beginning, which is just because I happen to have a certain surname, because I come from a certain family, everything in my life has to have been smooth sailing, right? It's like, well, I mean, he's come from money, therefore he could never have had any problems. But you know, I mean, how do you quantify what problems are? So I think that's the biggest the overall conception. But I think the other thing is that, you know, of course, I did live in India in my early 20s for about a year, and I did enjoy the life that I had there. But of course, I was 22 years old. Like, you know, I think the thing is that I think people sometimes forget that we can change. Like, I mean, you're not the same person you were yesterday, let alone 10 years ago. And I think we should, it's more than 10 years for me now. I'm 34. So we're going back 12 years or so. I think, and this isn't just for me, I think this is for everyone, which is we should allow ourselves to understand that people evolve, and our views of them should be flexible as well, to reflect who they are today. And today, people still have this image of me, of this person who, I don't know, party boy, models, this and that. But, you know, I'm 34 years old. I'm single. I'm not married. No children, much to my, I'm sure, grandmother and mother's dismay. But, you know, I live on my own in my apartment in Los Angeles with my dog. I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to do conversations like this.
Yes.
I try and sleep by 9 o'clock at night. Like, you know, I live a very, if you like it, quite a low-key life, which I think is quite hard for people. And when they find that out, they're almost disappointed by it.
That's one of the biggest myths that you've busted today. I wouldn't have believed it like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Today I believe you. I'll try to. Okay. Coming to the next question, Sid. Can I call you that? It's just easier.
Yeah. Yes, of course.
Thank you. So this book is a raw, brutally honest account of your battles with mental health issues. And given all the anguish that you must have had to face, it must have been an ordeal to relive some of your painful memories. And you felt betrayed, you know. So while penning it down, what I want to ask you is, was it cathartic experience for you, or was it triggering, or did you oscillate between the two? And if yes, then how did you cope with, you know, those roller coaster of emotions?
I'll give you the long answer to this, because this is something I get asked actually quite often.
Please do.
So, I mean, one would think that it was cathartic. It actually wasn't. And I think the reason is that I think, and I'm sure you might have experienced this or anything, but if you've bottled something up for a long time, when you finally release it, it's a cathartic experience. Now, everything I talk about in this book, it's not like I just woke up one fine morning and decided to write the book. You know, as I say, this book is a culmination of years worth of self-work and working with a therapist and everything like that. So everything I talk about in the book is something that I've already done the work on, if you know what I mean, in order to be able to write about it. So I guess I already had my cathartic experience when I first started working through a lot of the issues in the book.
Yeah.
So now writing about it, you know, things become easier to deal with. But pain is always pain, and it's always going to be there, right? You know, I mean, you lose a loved one. I mean, it's not a comparison, but you lose a loved one.
Oh, yeah.
Time makes it easier to deal with.
Right.
But the memory of losing them never goes away. And when you think about it, of course you're going to get upset. So it's like with anything. So it's like with this, like going back and reading it, you know, writing this. And I'll also tell you the process of how I wrote this, because I started typing it out. And I was like, I can't do this. This is really boring. So I ended up speaking the book, like interviewing myself and talking. So everything I started actually talking it out into a microphone, and I, you know, transcribed it and did it like that.
Yeah.
So actually, not only was I writing it, I was talking it and kind of reliving it like that, which made it really quite difficult to do. And I think the hardest thing with it was not really talking about myself, but when I mention other people, right? We're talking about memories I have from things that happened, almost some things 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, like everything in life, there's a fear that I was like, do I remember that correctly? Is that exactly what happened? Because, you know, now you're involving other people in the story and you got to make sure that what you're saying is true. So it was always that little bit of second guessing that went on. But no, I'm pretty good. And like, if I needed any facts checked, I would call my mom up and I would ask her before putting it in. I'd be like, have I got my ages right? Did this? And she's like, yeah. So
they were okay with you talking about them openly.
I mean, they didn't know I was going to do it. I mean, my mum did. My dad didn't know I was even writing. He knew I was writing a book. I don't think he knew what it was about. But I spoke to my mum about it, and I said to my mum, I said, "Look, I'm writing this book." So she'd seen my Consider This series, which I'm not sure if you've seen on mental health. She was aware that I was doing a lot of this work, and she was actually really happy for me, like, because she could see how much joy it was bringing me to help people. So she was really invested. And she would watch all the episodes and all this stuff. And I did say to her, I said, look, I'm going to do this. I'm going to talk about loneliness and the divorce. And I obviously can't talk about the divorce without mentioning the two people, my parents, who were in. And she got it. She understood it and she was fine. And after she read it, she liked it. And actually my mum, me and my mum have already, I mean, I don't know if this was going to be a question, but I'll segue into it now. But we've spoken about the divorce and I've write about it in the book. Like, you know, I mean, it happened when she was not many years older than what I am today. And no one's prepared for divorce. Like, no one gets married with the idea that they're going to get divorced. It's an unnatural thing. And, you know, we both kind of like laugh about it today, being like, it was literally the blind leading the blind. And I think she's actually quite happy that I talked about it in the way that I did, because maybe there are other people out there today who could learn from our experience, and maybe it might be a better journey for them in whatever capacity.
Sidhartha, for the youngsters listening to us today, in your book, you've mentioned about responsible drinking. I find that extremely important, where you talk about how one may not be alcoholic, may not even be probably addicted, and yet their drinking might be problematic. It may be affecting their mental health in ways that they don't understand. So how do you drill that concept into the youth's minds? Also, do you think high schools and universities in India could take an initiative in this direction and maybe educate children about it? Because in your book, you talk about this, in your boarding, there was this place, now I don't remember the name of that hall, which is practically like a bar. And, you know, it teaches young boys about moderation when it comes to drinking. And I really like that concept. For me, I think it was a first to read about that. And in India, it's unheard of. So what do you have to say about this?
Well, I think it's two things, right? I think the legal drinking age in India, I believe, is 21. In some states, it's 25 or something, I believe. I've read somewhere.
Okay, I'm not sure, but I guess,
The US is 21 as well. The UK is 18. And a lot of Europe is 18. And I think what they find is that, now I'm a believer that 18 is fine. I mean, you're a legal adult, you can vote, you can go to war. So why shouldn't you be able to have a beer? But, excuse me. But it's like anything in life. The longer you try and keep something away from someone, the more there is a desire to do it, right?
Right.
So
the forbidden fruit.
So I don't think this is something that comes down to just alcohol. I think this comes down to everything, responsibility. What it comes down to is finding a balance. And balance is something that, trust me, that I'm still working on. And, you know, we talk about addictions and everything, and I can guarantee that 90% of the youngsters are addicts. And I'll say, oh, you're an addict. And they'll be like, what are you talking about? I'm not an addict. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I said, what do you do 90% of the day? Oh, I scroll through my phone on Instagram. Is that not an addiction? What is it? Right? So we've got to stop looking at that word addiction just in respect to narcotics and drinking and smoking and stuff like that. An addiction is an addiction, regardless of what it is. It could be addicted to going to the gym. You could be addicted to your phone, which most of us are guilty of. I am. And I think it's about finding that balance. And I think it's with everything. I think youngsters today, you know, when you were growing up, when I were growing up, we just weren't as exposed to as much as what the kids growing up today are. Their exposure levels are far greater, and it's only going to get more and more, right? Therefore, it's much easier for them to get addicted to certain things, which we never did, just simply because it didn't exist, right? Instagram didn't exist when I was at school. So I think it's about teaching youngsters moderation or balance, not just in relation to alcohol, but in relation to life.
Right. Very true. Very well said. So yeah, there. So, but you would still say that schools and universities should start thinking about how to introduce the concept of drinking in moderation, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I don't know how they would do it. I know there are experts who probably know this better than me, but I do think that, yeah, you know, at least teaching about moderation, teaching about the effects of alcohol,
yes,
you know, this sort of stuff would definitely help.
It's important. It's important, right? I'm coming to my next question. With the access that you've had, you could have easily gotten way ahead in your acting journey than probably where you are now. I mean, your father, back in the day when you were in India, your father might have had a few directors, top-notch Bollywood directors on speed dial. And not enough people appreciate the fact that you did not take the easy route to success. Rather, you chose, if I may say, tedious trajectory. Did you ever wonder where you could have been today if, while you were in India, Bollywood would have piqued your interest?
Yeah, I mean, I of course I think about it. I think about, like, could I have done Bollywood? Well, how would it have lasted? Or even in Hollywood, right? Even when I moved here 9 years ago, there was definitely routes for me to get further ahead. But it's not something I wanted to do. And it's funny how it's portrayed, right? Because if I'd done that, there would have been the narrative that, oh, he only got it because of his father. Right. I didn't do that. And now I read articles in the paper that refer to my acting career as a failed acting career. Okay. So I was like, you're in a no-win situation here, no matter what you do. But you know what? I'm content. I feel like I've paid my dues. As I said, I've been to drama school. I mean, one of the world's best drama schools. I've been professionally trained. I've worked hard. I've studied. I've not taken the easy route out. And when it's meant to be, I'm not doing this anymore for anyone else, which that's the big change, the shift I've had, is that I write that in the book. And I think when I stopped trying to do this to prove things to other people, it became a lot more enjoyable.
So taking this harder route, tell us how much more gratifying that has been. I mean, do you have any regrets, or the sense of fulfillment that you have today has been worth it?
It's been worth it, definitely, because I think, would I be loving to be acting more? Would I be love to be given opportunities to act? Of course, because I love doing it, right? I'd love to be on multiple film sets all at once. But I don't think I perhaps would have found myself in the way that I have. And I'd like to think, you know, honestly, at the age of 34, it's not young, but it's not old either. I'd like to think that I found myself and done deep work on myself that a lot of people actually never do in their whole life. And maybe I would never have done that had I, you know, gone down a different trajectory. And more than that, maybe there definitely wouldn't be this book, right? And we wouldn't be able to have these conversations, and this book wouldn't be able to be there to help people. And so I think it's worked out the way it should have.
So it's a great takeaway for all the youngsters who are listening, because sometimes harder route is better, more fulfilling. So it's important for you to get that word out there.
And just learn. Let me just say something on that, is that just take every experience in, no matter what it is. I had a journalist interview me for the book about a month ago, a guy from Bangalore. He was like 21 or something, 22, straight out of college, first gig, and he was interviewing me. And I asked him, I said, who have you interviewed? He said he'd interviewed me. He'd interviewed some pretty big names in the country. And I said to that kid, and I said to him, I was like, listen, don't just look at this as a job. Every single one of these interviews, use it as an opportunity to try and learn from the other person. Be a sponge. Try and take in as much as you can, and that will help shape you into the person that you want to be, and down the line. And that's what I'd say to any youngster, is that no matter what you're doing, absorb it all and learn from it.
Very nice.
And know that who you are today is not who you're going to be tomorrow.
Right. On a lighter note, Sidhartha, you've once been called Sidhartha Mallya, India's most desirable. So
Yeah.
how did you respond to that back then? And how would you probably respond to it now?
Back then, I thought it was great, right? I mean, that was 10 years ago as well. I was young. I was in India. It sounded cool. It was a good talk. I enjoyed being on the show. I was on I think it was a talk show that I did, which was fun. But today I look back on that and I just, I cringe at it. I feel almost like, oh God, how did I ever do something like that? And clearly I'm not that desirable because I'm still 34 and without anyone. So they might have got the wrong person.
Okay, one last question, and then we'll move on to the questions that audience are sending us. All right, so yeah, this is important, I think. Privilege and guilt, two things that you've probably dealt with throughout your life. Tell us about the guilt that comes with privilege. You have, in fact, dedicated an entire chapter to it called Built on Guilt, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I am. Well, I think it's to do with the way that others feel, right? And it's the way that kind of, I think comments were constantly made. People would say certain things, and it was even like offhand remarks. But every time an offhand remark is made, it kind of does add to this narrative in your head that like, oh, have I done something wrong? Like, why are people saying this? Like, I have no choice from the family I'm from. So it did have an effect on me growing up. And it's definitely something that I'm still working on to try and get over. You're on mute. Still muted.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now you can.
Yeah. So no, I guess you don't need to feel that guilt. And as you do more of your self-work and the work that you're doing on Instagram, I'm sure that's going to help you more. Okay, we have questions here now. What I can see is one from Vishakha Banerjee Loreto. The question is, what are you most grateful for in your life?
Oh, I can also see these questions.
Okay.
One of my most grateful for is, it's so hard to just like put down right into one thing. I'll tell you for what I'm most grateful for right now. And this might not be the overall thing in life, but what I'm really grateful for is that I was given an opportunity to write a book that might be able to help one other person in the world. And I'm really grateful for being given the opportunity by my publishers, by the people who've bought the book, by everyone, not for the money or anything like that, because if anyone knows the book industry, like no one's making big bucks from this book. But I'm just grateful for the opportunity to have been able to share my story in the hope that I may be able to help other people out there.
Oh, okay. Can you see the questions, Sidhartha?
Yeah. Shall I read some of them off?
Yeah, whatever you're comfortable answering.
All right, let's see.
Archana Dalmia ji wants to ask you.
Yeah, I see that. So how do you deal? Archana says, how do you deal with pain?
Can I ask my own question, Sidharth? I just want to know.
Definitely. Sidhartha, this is Archana ji from Delhi, Ehsas woman of Delhi.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Sidharth. Sidharth, I just want to know, people generally think that all privileged people come without challenges in life. And I just want to also ask you that how do you deal with loneliness and pain because we are normal and we have challenges in life. Everybody does.
Of course. I think, well, pain, the thing that I've realized is first of all accepting that it exists and it's a part of life, right? I think what can happen is that you can start doing so much self-work, which I did, in this hope that by the time I finish doing all this work, I'll never feel pain again, and which simply isn't true. It's always going to be there. But I think dealing with pain, first of all, comes from surrendering to it and acknowledging it and allowing yourself to be vulnerable to the pain. I think a lot of the time what happens is that we feel pain and then we try and fight it, right? We have this kind of civil war going within where we try and fight the pain, which causes more pain. But if you surrender to it, if you allow yourself to be vulnerable, it makes it, I think, a lot easier to just let it pass through you. Is that good?
We have more questions coming in.
Yeah. Shall I read through them?
Yeah, if you're okay with that, yeah.
Okay, so we have someone, it's an anonymous attendee, asks, you've had your fair share of good times as well as bad ones. How do you endure the hard days and motivate yourself to push forward? Again, it comes down to trying not to fight them and just understanding that it's a part of life, which was a really big challenge for me because I started again believing, like, after doing all the self-work, every day should be a great day. It's just not true, right? There's so many different things that can happen. But I think it's just realizing and remembering that everything that you're in is temporary. Everything is temporary in life. I have this tattoo on my neck here, which basically says you're in the eye of the storm until you're dancing in the rain, which is basically kind of like that old quote, which is this too shall pass. And I think it's to remember that whatever discomfort you're going through, no matter what the day feels like, it is temporary. And also on that note, remember joy is temporary as well. So enjoy it as much as it can. Everything is fleeting in this lifetime. So make it count.
Very well said. The next question is from Parumita Mukherjee. There are a lot of posts, and I really like this. There are a lot of posts on social media about people being there with their doors open if someone needs help with mental stress or any issues. However, when one approaches for help, people are too busy with their own lives, or they are judgmental, or they kind of find it negative. So what is your take on that?
Well, I'd say to anyone out there, I think it's great. I think it's amazing people want to open their door and be there for each other. But don't say that unless you actually mean it. That's what I'd say, is that don't commit to doing something unless you're actually willing to put your money where your mouth is. Because of course it's going to be uncomfortable. Of course it can. But as I say to people is that a lot of the time people don't want to help each other, right? Because they're like, oh, I don't know what to say. I'm not a professional. A lot of the time people aren't looking for help, right? They just want someone to talk to. They just want to be heard. They're not looking for advice. They're not looking to be fixed. So I'd say to anyone, keep your door open only if you mean it, and then when your door's open, just be a good listener. I think that's the best thing we can do to help each other.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Sidhartha. Another question is from Pragati Sagar. She says 3 key affirmations that you believe in and suggest when mental state is on a downslide. Are there any key affirmations that you would recommend? I think read your book.
We can read my book. There's a nice saying that one of my spiritual people here in Los Angeles gave me, which really resonated with me, which is a line, which is faith beyond logic. And I kind of like that because I think we as human beings always feel like we have this intrinsic need to understand everything, right? And to make logical sense of everything. Why am I feeling this way? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? And a lot of the time we don't actually need to understand it. Just have a faith and a trust that it will pass without really having to do anything about it.
Yeah, thank you. I see Priyanka Kothari asking...
Can I just say sorry on that thing is also, one affirmation is always, I should have led with this, always remember whatever you're going through, you are not alone. You are not
That was-
alone. I know at
that was-
times, I
yeah.
know at times you can feel like you're the only one in the world who could be suffering, like no one else could understand. But there's always a lot more people who could feel the way and relate to you. So don't feel like you're on your own.
That was your dedication, which I
That was the
absolutely
big thing,
loved.
yeah.
Yeah. Priyanka Kothari is asking, how do you deal with being boxed a Mallya, then Sidhartha?
With great difficulty. I get messages from people on Instagram asking me to return their money, and I'm like, I think you've got the wrong Mallya here.
Right.
I mean, we joke about it, but it's like, you know, obviously it's a serious issue what my dad's going through, but people have to accept that people are individuals, right? People are separate. Just because you happen to be related to someone doesn't mean that you are then responsible for everything they've done.
Right.
And it can get frustrating at times when, you know, I will say this, which has been fortunate, is that a lot of the interviews I've done for the book, journalists, sessions like this with you, Anshul, if they've been great because the majority, 99% of people have focused on me and my book and not on anything else just because I happen to be related to someone. And that's a gratifying experience, because I'm like, you know, what I would have hated is for me to have written this book and then for somehow it to have all been about someone else.
True. Okay, there's a question from Risham Gill. Being so privileged as you were, how did you keep yourself grounded?
Well, I grew up with my mum in the UK, right? I didn't grow up in India, so I was kind of oblivious. Of course, from a material point of view, I was privileged, but I was quite oblivious to sort of what the family name or anything like that really meant. I also went to boarding school when I was 10 years old. And I think a lot of people forget this. I mean, India is a country where people still live with their parents and in-laws till they're 70. I was sent away from home at the age of 10. And looking back on that, that is very young. Like,
very young.
Very young. And I was living in a boarding school, British boarding school, with a lot of other kids. And I was just a regular child. And I think that definitely helped with my grounding.
And you were bullied. There were racist comments. There were, again, being
everything.
Everything. So you've gone through all of that, which I think any other normal kid would have to go through.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, I think we've come to the end of the questions. There's one thing that I wanted to say to everybody who's listening to us today, that in the book, you've talked about a lot of important issues, a lot of important terminology, if I could say that. There is borderline alcoholism that you talk about, of course, clinical depression, therapy, why it's important, self-work, various kinds of OCD, paranoia, irrational fears, probably stemming from a place of abandonment issues, loneliness, darkness, all of that. So I want this to go out to an audience that they must read the book to understand these issues better, because from our understanding of these terms, I think it doesn't even begin to scratch the surface. But if I had to congratulate you, Sid, on one thing that really touched my heart, I think almost made me cry, was when you talk about how you have decided to break the generational cycle of trauma. I think it's the single most important thing that one can do to make this world a better place. So there is a place where you talk about, if I am ever fortunate enough to have a family, I'm going to make sure that they do not feel unsupported, that they are loved. I felt that is so important. If everyone just tried to do this much, the world would be so much better, and we would actually rid ourselves of so much of trauma. So thank you for that, and congratulations on that bit.
Thank you very much for mentioning that. That's great. Do we have a little
time for one or two questions?
Let me go. There's a few questions on this that I want to answer.
Yes.
All right,
Let's do that.
I'm going to choose this one. Okay, so Dipali asks, fallout of relationships, especially romantic relationships, has a significant impact on a person's mental well-being. However, you steered clear of talking about it in your book. Has it been a conscious choice? Again, something I've been asked before as well. Honestly, my fallouts from my relationships, all my breakups have been, touch wood, quite good. And I've stayed on good terms with the girls afterwards. So the reason they're not mentioned in the book is just simply because I don't feel any of them caused enough of a long-term mental impact on me to be in the book. Everything I talk about in the book is something that has had a mental impact on me during my life. Now, I talk about one of my ex-girlfriends, how, every time I was with her family, I felt like I was a part of something. And I talk about I talk about loneliness stemming from, and the need. So for example, I talk about my relationships in regard to the divorce and always craving a family. And that's as much as it's kind of had an impact on me in the book. So the reason I don't mention them is because I didn't feel it had enough of a long-term mental impact to make the book. Shristi asks, how did you deal with your parents' separation at such a young age? Truth is, at that age, I didn't know any better. I was an only child. And then suddenly my dad remarries. And I'm introduced to these two young girls and told that I have siblings, and this woman that he married had 2 kids from previous marriage. And suddenly I was like, this is great. Like, I have family. Like, when you're that young, you don't really think about it. But as I say in the book, I think it caused a lot of trauma that stuck with me, that only became apparent to me as the years went on. And a lot of my issues of abandonment, loneliness, and craving that family all stem from the divorce. And I think that the idea is that a lot of the time, even though we might not be aware that something's having an impact on us, subconsciously it might be impacting us in ways that we aren't quite aware. And that definitely was the case with the divorce.
There is Gurleen for asking you. Yeah, will you take that?
I got two more here, which I'll do is I'll start with Paramitas first. Many celebrities have created foundations for mental health. However, common man in India rarely approach these foundations for fear of being termed as mentally unstable. What is your advice on this? We got to continue the conversation as much as we can to normalize it. If you got a toothache, you go to a dentist. No one's going to question it. If you've got a headache, you go to a doctor. No one's going to question it. So if you've got something here, why wouldn't you go to a mental health professional? And there's nothing wrong. There's no shame. There's no stigma. Listen to this. I always say this. India is the motherland of well-being, right? Spirituality, well-being, all of that stuff. You have people from the West flocking to India, right? Mind, body, and soul. Okay, well, people do yoga. They go to Kerala for Ayurvedic cleanses and all of this sort of stuff to take care of the body. They go to temples, they do fasts, they do all of this, they chant to look after their soul. But God forbid anyone in India tries to look after their mind, suddenly they're labeled as being unstable. And I think we've got to change that whole narrative. And remember, the mind is part of the body. It doesn't mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean you're nuts. It doesn't mean, and we got to stop using these words, crazy, mad, nuts, all of these things. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. So I'd say to you out there, let yourself go. Get the help that you need. Of course, people are going to judge. People are going to judge, for whatever you do in life. But don't feel like there's any shame in it, because there's absolutely no shame in it. Putting the guard down, putting your hands up and saying, I need help is actually the biggest show of strength we have.
Brave, yeah.
So I hope that helps. And then I'll give this final question, which is Gurleen. If you could suggest one basic daily habit that we could all include in order to have a positive outlook to our respective lives, no matter how tough they seem to be. Meditation has really helped me. I meditate. I'm going to meditate after this call. I usually meditate first thing in the morning. It's just a nice grounding experience. It's a time where I can switch off, just sit with myself and really center. And I think it's great for anyone to do, to kind of really give you that moment in the day where you just want to hit the pause button.
Thank you, Sidhartha. Sidhartha, your name, Sidhartha, means the one who has achieved his purpose. And with your series, Consider This, if the viewers don't know, there is a whole mini series called Consider This on Instagram. And now your recent spoken word, then this phenomenal, brutally honest book, which I at least loved to bits. And not to mention your acting career, I feel you really are onto the path of fulfilling your purpose. I hope you continue to be yourself and live in your absolute truth. That's the bravest and most beautiful thing one can do. I would now like to just congratulate you one last time
Oh,
and
thank
wish you
you.
all the best on your journey ahead. And over to you, Shruti ji. Shruti Mallya ji is going to give vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Angela. Big, thank you to you as well. Thank you to your foundation for having me here, and a big thank you to everyone who tuned in for this session as well. These sessions are only as good as the people who come to them, right? And they're only as good as the questions I'm asked. So a big thank you to all of you, and thank you for sending in such great questions, and thank you also for taking the time to want to learn more about a subject like mental health. The only way we're going to be able to get the message out there and spread the word and destigmatize it is if we get more people talking about it. So really, thank you very much. It's very humbling.
Oh, you could have written about your glitz and glamour, and you talk about that in one of your interviews. I could have written about the glitz and the glamour and the life that I had. And you could have just reduced mental health to a chapter or two, but I am really thankful that you chose this topic. I hope people should go back and read the book. Over to you, Shruti ji.
Thank you, Anchal, and that's been a wonderful session. So very interesting. On behalf of the foundation, I would like to thank Sidhartha Mallya and Achal Garcha for this beautiful session. I would also like to show my gratitude towards our presenter, Shree Cement Limited. Last but not the least, I would like to show appreciation towards our patrons, without whom today's session would not have been so successful. Stay well, stay safe. Goodbye for now.
Thank you very much.